Hello and welcome to Ben Ross's Conservatorium of Audio. I'm Ben Rosser, and today we're going to be taking a look at Native Instruments FM8. FM8 is quite a handy synth and is very good for creating quite a variety of different sounds, and has many different quite powerful features built in which are really good for giving you that extra bit of control and expressiveness over the sounds that you create with it. So firstly, we're going to go through and have a bit of a look at the FM8 interface, help you get a little bit more familiar with how everything's laid out, and then we're going to get stuck into creating a variety of different sounds so that you can see exactly how everything comes together. FM8 is a frequency modulation based synthesizer, which basically means it uses some oscillators, otherwise known as modulators, to modulate other oscillators, otherwise known as carriers. And although that might seem a little bit confusing to start off with, once we get a bit stuck into it, you'll see how it all comes together and it won't seem so hard anymore. So, as I said, we're just going to have a quick look through the interface. So, as we can see, we're currently looking at the browser, which gives us access to all of our different presets, as we can see, and also allows us to select different attributes to be able to easily find the sort of sounds that we're looking for. With the sounds that we create today, we aren't going to be using any of the built-in presets, but the skills that you'll pick up will help you if you do find a preset that you like and just want to modify it a little bit to suit what you're doing with it. So you'll find in your VST library, when you've got FM8 installed, there is actually two copies. There's a synthesizer copy and an effect copy. And you'll find if you're using the effect copy, there is also a wide variety of different effects that you can use to create some quite interesting sounds. So we will have a look at that a little bit further later in the tutorial. We've also got the ability to set different attributes for whatever presets that we create, as well as setting the meta information such as the author, the company, the bank name, and various other elements, as you can see, for your individual presets. Our next screen contains our main master controls, including our main output level, our input level control and meter, our controls to adjust the polyphony of the synth, or how many notes it's able to play simultaneously. We also have a nice unison setup, so we can get really nice detuned saw waves, for example, which is one of the first sounds we're going to be looking at. We've got a set of pitch controls, portamento controls to allow us to glide between different notes. We've got some simple controls for the arpeggiator, and we've also got some quality controls. Now, the quality controls are quite interesting as they do allow you to add a little bit of a different character to the sound. For example, by bringing up the analog slider, it will actually add that little bit of randomness into the sounds and will give you a bit more of the sort of feel that you would get out of a slightly unpredictable hardware synth. The digital control allows you to effectively control the bit depth of the sound. So if you're after something that sounds a little bit more old school and has a lower bit depth than what you would normally come across, then give that one a bit of a push and you'll start to get some of that nice, almost bit crushed sort of sound. Next up, we've got our effects section. We've got quite a variety of effects we can choose from, as you can see in our list on the left-hand side there. And we will go through those guys in a little bit more detail as we're creating some sounds. We've got quite an advanced arpeggiator, which gives us quite a lot of control over the sounds that we create with it, and has a variety of different controls aside from our pattern editor. We've got our global controls, which allows us to save arpeggiator settings. We've got our mode controls, which allow us to determine how the arpeggiator is triggered and how it works. We've got various tempo controls, which allow us to control how quickly the arpeggiation plays out. And we've also got some expression controls, which allow us to add a little bit of variety to the sound with the arpeggiator. Next up, we've got our easy settings as well as our morph window. These allow us easy access to our LFOs, our various timbre controls which affect how our different oscillators interact. We've got our output controls. We've got easy access to our effects, which we had a look at just before. And we've also got two envelopes, one to control the timbre of the sound and one to control the overall amplitude envelope of the sound. Now, what we're going to be doing today is getting a little bit more in depth, so we're not going to be taking so much of a look at these controls as we are the ones on the next page, which is our expert controls. These allow us access to the 6 main oscillators within FM8, as well as a 7th oscillator, which provides us with a bit of a noise generator, and our final module, which basically is a 2-mode filter, so we can get some quite good stuff happening with that filtering. Within our expert window, we do have a variety of different controls aside from just our oscillators, or our operators as they're known in the FM world. We've also got our amplitude envelopes for each of the operators. As you can see, just by clicking on each of those allows you to go in there and edit them. We've got our modulation, routing and LFO controls. As you can see, we've got 2 LFOs in here and quite a lot of ability to route those pretty much wherever we want them to go. So as we can see at the moment, we've got the pitch bend up and down routed to our pitch control for our operators, and as well as our LFO1 mod is going in there as well. We've also got our window that allows us to adjust the tuning of the notes and how those particular notes affect the different operators. And we can also access each of the operators individually, as you can see, and we can also do that by clicking on them in the FM matrix view as well. So that's quite handy. And finally, the last one we're going to have a quick look at is our pitch window, which basically allows us to add pitch envelopes. Again, you can see the same controls for the portamento or glide, as well as various other controls to allow us to modulate the pitch, as well as adjusting its envelope, etc. So as you can see, it's quite a well-packed and quite a powerful synth. And as a result, it can be a little bit daunting to get your head around to start off with, but it is quite simple once you start to get into it, and doesn't seem quite so daunting after all. Lastly, up the top, as we can see, we've got our typical controls to be able to load and save presets. We can also hide and show various parts of the FM8 interface. One of the last things we're just going to have a quick look at up the top here on the right hand side is our MIDI learn control. Basically, all you have to do is click this one, click whichever control you want. Say for example, we'll go for our amplitude envelope. Then it's a matter of just quickly adjusting the control you're after on your MIDI controller. And as you can see, we've got easy control over that one straight away. So if you do want to get a bit more expressive, if you've got a MIDI keyboard with knobs and sliders and stuff, you can quite easily assign those to various different elements of FM8. And even in a live performance situation, it can allow you to get quite expressive with the synth. So now that we've had a look through the various parts of the interface, we'll get it stuck into the more fun side and get some sounds happening. So we're going to go through a variety of different sounds today. The first one we're going to have a look at is a bit of a detuned saw wave sound, something nice and simple just to get us started off and get you to have a bit of a better understanding of how the different operators work and how they can work together, and some of the ways that you can combine them in order to come up with quite different sort of sounds than you would typically come up with on a subtractive synthesizer. So let's get stuck into making that one. So as I mentioned, we're just going to be starting off by creating a fairly simple detuned saw type of sound, sort of thing that you'll typically come across in drum and bass. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making use of all 6 of our main operators, and we're going to be setting it up so that we've got 3 basic layers happening. We're going to have one layer that is sitting down at a lower octave, And then we're going to have two other layers that are sitting an octave above that, and we're going to have one panned a bit left and one panned a bit right. So once we add the detuning to that, it's going to give us a much bigger sound than we would have had otherwise. So as we can see, we've currently got our F operator turned on and set up. We've got it routing its audio straight to our output. We can adjust how much of it is being routed to our output just by left clicking on it and then dragging up and down, or we can just adjust our level control, which does the same thing for us. So by default we're on 80%, so we'll stick there for the moment. And we've currently got our waveform set on a sine wave, so we might just change that one to a sawtooth. And if we just play a note, as you can see, fairly simple sawtooth sound that you would get from pretty much any typical oscillator and a subtractive synth. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to turn on our D operator. It doesn't really matter which way you choose to use these, but because it can get a bit messy with the routing sometimes, to have a little bit of a plan to start off with can sometimes help. So we're going to use E and F to produce our deeper, lower octave sound, and then we're going to use C and D to produce one of our higher octave sounds, and we're going to use A and B to produce our third layer, which is the second high sound. So we're just going to set D up for the moment, and we're also going to route some of it to the output. About the same as we've got happening with the other one. To get this one to go up an octave for us, it's just a matter of turning the ratio up to 2, which will basically double the frequency of the note that is feeding into that operator. And we're just going to also do the same for our B operator. So we'll set that to about 80% as well. Just go into that one, and we're just going to turn its ratio up. So we've got our F operator producing our lower frequency with our 1:1 ratio, and we've got our D operator and our B operator producing at an octave higher than that. You can also pan these guys. So in order to pan our D to the right, we can simply just click and drag on our panning, which is our lower row, as we can see here. So just pan that one 55 to the right. We can pan the other one about the same to the left, as we can see there. So if we just play that sound, we'll just quickly change these oscillators to also be sawtooths. Just giving us something a bit more along the lines of what we're after. So it will come to life a bit more once we add the unison and the detuning, but for the moment it's giving us a fairly good place to start. So we're going to now bring in our E operator, and with this one we're going to set it up with a 1 + 2 + 3 saw, and we're also going to route some of this one into the output as well for the moment. So about the same as we've got with the other guys. If we play a note with that now, you can see we're starting to get something a bit deeper happening with our sound as a result of the E operator being brought in there. What we can also do is we can get our E operator to modulate the F1. So we can essentially use our E operator as our modulator and our F operator as our carrier. And to do this is fairly similar to what we've done with the other routing. We just choose the connection point between E and F, so we'll follow this down till we get to the row that F's on. Again, just click on the box and drag it up, and you can see we're now routing some of the output of the E operator into the F operator. So if we play a note while we have a bit of a fiddle with that, you can hear the sort of effect it's having as we adjust it. So we'll just get that sitting somewhere where it sounds fairly good for us. We'll just get that to have a little bit of an effect. We could also choose to go the other way and choose to get F to modulate E. In order to do that one, It's fairly similar. We'll just follow F up till we get to the E row and just adjust that one like so. So we'll just give that one a little bit for the moment. And then with our C operator, we're going to do something similar. We'll get the 1 + 2 + 3 saw. We're going to bring its ratio up to the same as the D operator. And then we're going to use that to modulate our D operator. So we'll bring that in a little bit. And you'll hear that one happening more on the right hand side because of the panning. And then to balance that out, we're going to get our final operator, our A operator, in there and doing something similar. So again, we'll click on that one. We'll go for a 1 + 2 + 3 saw wave, bring our ratio up, and add a little bit of routing in there. So just get that one about the same as the other one and have a play. So now that we've got a bit of a basic sound set up, we're going to add our unison to it, and we'll start to build up a bit more of a fatter sound. So we can do that just by going into our master controls section. We'll turn our unison voices up to 3 to start off with, and we'll add some detuning and also a bit of panning just to add a little bit of width to that as well. So if we play that now. And what we might also do is use our A operator to modulate our F operator, and we'll see if that gets anything interesting happening for us. So it is adding a nice little bit of bite for us at the moment. And one of the other handy things that we can do is we can make use of the filter. And it is a 2-mode filter, so we can set it up to be a band pass or a high pass, low pass, or a notch filter. There's a fair bit of control over what you can do with that one. To be able to use that one, it's a matter of routing our audio into our Z operator and then routing that into our output. So what we'll just quickly do is if we just double click these connections, that'll get rid of those for us. And then we can then route those guys into our Z operator or our filter. So we'll just get those brought up to the right level. Bring in our F operator. And also our E operator. Get it about the same. And then, as I said, we'll just route the output of the Z operator to the output of the synth. So if we then play a note, notice we're not getting too much out of it at the moment, as we don't have the operator turned on. It's quite important. So as I said, just by right-clicking on it, you can turn that one on and off. And hear what the filter's doing to the sound there. So we've currently got a low-pass filter happening. We might just change its mode a little bit, go for something a little bit more along the lines of a band pass. We'll just open up our spread control a bit. So that's given us something a little bit more interesting, gives you a bit of an idea of how the filter works. You can also choose to have the filters in parallel or serial. We're currently running them in serial, as we can see by our little knob there. And quite easily just adjust those into parallel mode. So with this filter, we've got our main cutoff control, which controls the cutoff of the first filter. It also has its own resonance control and a mode control, so we can go from a low pass to a band pass to a high pass. And with our second filter, we have a spread control, which allows us to adjust the relative difference between the cutoff of the second filter and the cutoff of the first filter. We've got a resonance control again for the second filter and a mode control again for the second filter. So they both work the same as the first filter. The only real difference is our spread control. So we can also mix between the two different filters. As you can see, our filter curve changing when we do that. And as I said, the ability to choose between either parallel or serial filter processing there. So now that we've seen how to get a fairly simple detuned saw type sound happening, we're going to move on to something a bit more along the lines of a pad. And to create this one, we're going to be using pretty much all of our operators except for our A operator and our input operator. So what we're going to do with our B through F operators is we're going to set those guys up with a sawtooth wave. So we'll just quickly go through and choose that one for all of these. And we're also just going to adjust some of our ratios as well. So I'll just bring this guy down a little bit. And this is just to give us a bit of variety in the sound that we're creating. So by giving all of our different saw waves a bit of a different sound or a bit of a different frequency, it will allow them to fill up a bit more space and will essentially give us a similar sort of detuned sort of large sound as we had previously. So as I said, we'll just get this one set up. Just bring this one up a little. So basically, we're just going to get them all sitting on the fairly own sort of frequencies. So that might do us for the moment. What we're going to do with these guys, instead of routing them straight to the output, we're going to do what we did with the previous sound, and we're going to route those straight into our filter. Again, we'll go for about our default 80%, as we can see there. So basically that will allow all of these guys to combine and come together as a whole sound, which we're then going to add a bit of filtering to. And we're also going to make use of our X operator, which basically allows us to add a little bit of distortion to the sound, or a bit of wave shaping. So that one can be quite handy for helping to add a little bit of extra character to a sound as well. So now that we've got those guys set up fairly well where we want them, we'll just get our Z operator turned on, and we're going to get it routed to our output. So we'll go for about halfway with this one, because we're also going to blend in some of our output from our wave shaper. So again, we'll just record arm that channel, and if we play a note, I'll give you a bit of an idea of the sort of sound that we've got happening to start off with. So what we're just going to quickly do is we're going to get our filter set up. So I might just bring our cutoff up a little bit less resonance on our first filter. Also bring down the resonance of our second filter. And just to be able to get to all of our other controls, we'll just quickly jump into our Z operator. So some of them are hidden when you're viewing your overall operators, so you do get a lot more control over your individual operators by going into their individual screens. So what we're going to do is we're just going to leave our modes on low pass, leave our filters in a serial setup, and we're going to leave our mix taking its sound from the output of our second filter. So this will allow both of the filters to have a bit of an effect on the sound. So again, if we play that one, not hugely exciting so far. What we're going to do this time is we're going to make a bit of use of our filter envelope. So just get a bit of attack on there, and we're basically going to get this guy to drop off for us. So add a little bit of length in there, and we'll just bring our curve up a tiny bit just to get a little bit more movement. In order to get that envelope to actually affect our filter, we need to turn up our envelope amount. We'll just bring that one up a tiny bit. So if we play a sound now, so starting to get a little bit more of an interesting sound in there. We're also going to bring up our overall level just a tiny bit. Might bring that down a little bit once we add the wave-shaped sound in there. We might also just bring our velocity up a little too, just to allow us to get the velocity of the notes we play. To affect the sound of our filter. So as we can see, if we play a softer note, get a lower filter sound. If we play it hard, we get a bit of a higher filter sound. So just helping to add a little bit of expressiveness into the sound, make it a little bit more fun to play. And what we're now going to do is we're going to get a little bit more routing happening, start to get a little bit more stuff going on with our sound and get a little bit more complex. So what we're going to do with each of these 5 main operators we're using is we're going to actually get them to feed back on themselves. So what we can do, as you notice above each of these main operators is an extra box. These ones allow us to feed back the particular operator straight back into itself. So we're just going to bring these up to maybe about 20%. As we can see there. Just giving us almost a little bit more of a metallic sound. So we'll turn our wave shaper on. We're going to get some of our filtered sound feeding into that. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to get some of that also feeding into our output. So as we can see, got our 5 main operators all feeding into our filter. We've got some of that going straight to our output, and we've also got some of that feeding into our wave shaper. And then we've also got some of the wave shaper being blended into the output as well. So as you can see, once you start to get a bit of a feel for how the routing actually happens in the FM matrix, things start to get a little bit easier. So what we'll do is we'll just get our wave shaper set up a little bit. So basically we're just going to bring our gain down a little bit and leave our level about where it is. And we'll see what sort of a sound we're getting out of that now. Might also just bring our gain down a tiny bit more. So as you can see, adding a light little bit of distortion over the top of the sound there. And then just to help fatten up that sound, we're going to also make use of a bit of detuning or unison in this case as well. So we're just going to use 2 voices in this case. We'll bring our detune up a decent bit, and we're going to leave our panning down for the moment. Just to add a little bit of an extra quality into the sound, we're also going to add a little bit of analog into that one. So that will just help, especially with our different operators. It will allow some of them to play slightly later or slightly before. Add that little bit of error in there, a little bit of unpredictability, which should hopefully help us to get a bit more of an interesting sound happening. So as you can see, it's starting to get quite a little bit different now. We're also going to add a bit of an effect to this one just to help finish it off. And I'm going to make use of maybe a chorus on this one, just to get something a little bit different. And I'm going to bring up our low cut a little bit, take out some of the bassier frequencies, take out some of the very high frequencies by bringing the low cut down a little bit. We won't worry about any feedback, and we're going to leave our mod rate and our mod depth where they are. We might also get the signal a little bit wetter than it is currently. Let's get a little bit more wet than dry in there, and we'll see how that one sounds. So it does sound a little bit dissonant due to the tuning of our operators, as we can see there, but it gives you a nice full sound, especially if you're playing a bit of a monophonic sound. So we can also just turn our polyphony down to 1, or just turn mono on, which means that when we press multiple notes, as you can see, we're only getting one coming up on the keyboard, and we're only getting one playing. So what we can then do, if we've got a bit of a monophonic sound, if we wanted to add even more interest to this one, is we could add a little bit of portamento, maybe bring our time up a little bit, and that'll allow us to glide between notes. As you can see, so you can get some quite interesting stuff happening with that one as well. So that could be especially good if you're after maybe some special effect or eerie sort of sounds for a film clip or something like that. So that gives you a bit of an idea of how to get a bit more routing done. Also how to use our wave shaper, as we've seen. So we're going to get stuck into yet another sound now. Something even more different. So we'll just get our copy of FM8 cleared back to a default setting, and we'll get that sound up and happening. So now that we've got FM8 back to our default settings, what we're going to do is we're going to create almost a bit of an electric guitar style sound. So for those of you who are a bit of a fan of Jordan Rudess, it'd be similar to along the lines of the sort of tones he uses when he does his keyboard guitar solos. So the sort of thing that can be quite expressive, especially played with a bit of a pitch wheel and a few other little bits of expression. You can get some quite good stuff happening. So again, we're going to start by getting our basic operators set up the way we need them. And what we're going to do is we're going to make use of 4 of them in this instance. So to start us off, we'll just turn our F operator off. We're going to start with our A, and with that one what we're going to do is we're just going to go for our parabolic waveform. So it's kind of similar to a sine wave, but slightly different. It's got a few different little characteristics happening in there. So to give us an idea of what that one sounds like, we'll just route some of that to our output. As you can hear, it's fairly quiet at the moment due to the fact that it is a sine wave sort of sound. Not much in the way of harmonic content there. So what we'll do is we'll start getting our other operators set up, and we'll get a bit of extra routing happening in here. So we're going to get our next operator up and happening, so we'll just turn that one on. And with this one, we're going to go for a bit of a short tri-state waveform. So as you can see, it's a bit of a chunky looking waveform and should give us something fairly interesting tonally to work with. So what we're going to do with that one is firstly we're going to route a tiny little bit of that into our A operator, as well as adding a little bit of feedback. So we'll get our A operator to do a little bit of work on itself there as well. So as you can see, it's starting to become quite a different sound than what we had just with our A operator on its own. Starting to get a nice little bit of bite in there. So what we're going to do next is set up our C operator. And for this one, we're going to be going for a bit of a soft square. So again, keeping a little bit of variation to help build up the tonality of the sound. And with this one, we're going to be routing it into the filter. So we'll get a bit of that one in there. Fair bit, maybe about 95%. And we're also going to route some of our B operator in there too. So we might go for a little bit less of this one. We might go for about 75%. And then we're also going to get these guys to feed back in on themselves as well. So what we'll do is we'll just turn up our B operator to about 25, and we'll turn up our F operator about the same amount. So again, just by adding this bit of feedback, just helping to create that extra bit of tonality with the sounds that those operators are generating. To get the sound through our filter, as we did before, we'll just turn that one on, and then we're going to route that one to our output for the moment. We will make a bit of use of our wave shaper as well, but for the moment we'll just hear how that's sounding straight through the filter. So still not anything hugely exciting so far, but slowly getting there. So we're just going to go into our filter, our Z operator, and we're going to get that one set up so it suits our sound a little bit better. So we're going to bring in the cutoff down of our first filter just a tiny bit. Add a decent dose of resonance to that one. Decent dose of resonance to our second filter as well. We'll bring our spread up a little bit. And again, we're just going to leave our mix and our parallel serial controls on their default settings. We're also going to add a bit of an envelope into this one as well. So we'll get a little bit of an attack happening. And shorten that one up a little bit. We'll bring down our next stage of our envelope a little bit. And you can also add multiple different stages to the envelope as well, which is quite handy. Just get that one zoomed to where we want it. So what we can do with this one, just get that one zoomed out a tiny bit more, just so that we can see what we're doing a little bit better. We want to have a fairly long amount of control over this one. And bring our next stage out a little bit. To add extra stages to the envelope is pretty easy. You can add or remove them just by right clicking. So as you can see, makes it quite easy to be able to get quite complex filters happening. So I'm just going to get this one to sweep back up a little bit from where it is. Just get that a little bit straighter, so you get a bit of a smooth step happening there. And get it to come up a little bit more as it plays out. And finally, we're going to get it to drop off. And we'll just bring that release time out a little bit more. So. And again, in order to get that one to have an effect, we need to bring up our envelope amount. As we can see there. So then if we play a note. So you'll notice at the start of the note, our filter is coming up to a bit of a sharp start and then dropping off to a bit of a smoother sort of tone. So starting to get where we want it to be. As I said, we're also going to be making use of our wave shaper. So we'll get that one set up now. And what we're going to be doing with that one is we're going to be routing some of the output of our filter straight into our wave shaper rather than having our filter going to the output. We're then going to take the output of the wave shaper and we'll feed that one to our output from there. So we'll bring that one up to about 85%. And with our wave shaper, again, we're going to stick with fairly simple settings. We're going to add a little bit of a symmetry to the sound, bring our level up a little bit more, and we're also going to push our gain all the way. So starting to give us one of the other things we're going to do is we're just going to add a little bit of release to our wave shaper envelope, just to help stop it from having too much of a sharp cutoff when the note's released. So as you can see there, starting to get an interesting bit of sound happening. And one of the other things we're going to do now that we've got our initial tone sort of starting to come together, is we're going to have a bit of a play with our envelopes in our actual main operators. So they basically work fairly similarly to a normal amplitude envelope. However, they do just independently affect each of the operators that we're applying to. So we can also go straight to our envelope screen, which can help make things a little bit easier as well. And we're just going to bring down the attack of this one and give it a bit of a longer attack. We're also going to give it a little bit more of a release. So again, we'll keep the lines on this one fairly straight rather than using too many curves. And then on our B operator, we're going to go for something slightly different. Basically, we'll leave it pretty much how it is. Might just bring out our sustain a little more. And then just add a little bit of release to that one. And then finally for our C operator envelope, we're going to go for something a little bit more different again. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to get a bit of a curve on the start of our envelope on our attack stage. You get that one to have a bit of a longer attack on it. And then we're going to get that one to drop off for us. So quite sharply, as we can see there. So we might even just bring that one up a little bit further. And we'll see how that one's sounding for us now. So again, we're going to make a bit of use of our unison effect just to help fatten up the sound a little bit. So just adding a little bit of detuning, and we're going to add a little bit of panning to this one as well. We might also see what we can do as far as adding a little bit of analog quality, considering we're going for a bit of an electric guitar style tone. We do want a little bit of unpredictability in the sound. So as you can see, that unison, just adding that little bit of something to the sound. Not overly crazy as we've used it in some of the other sounds, in the first two sounds that we've worked with. So now that we've got a bit of a basic sound happening, as you can hear, we're going to start to throw some effects on there and start to get it a bit more into the realm of a bit of an electric guitar sort of sound. So to start us off, we're going to throw a bit of a tube amp effect on there, as we can see there. Followed by a bit of a guitar cabinet. We're just going to stick with our basic settings for that one for the moment. We've just got our size turned up a bit, got our air brought down a bit, lowered our bass a little, and we've also pushed our treble a bit as well. So as you can see, starting to get us into more of a guitar sort of sound. We're going to throw a little bit of shelving EQ on there as well, just to give us a little bit more control over the actual tone of the sound. We're going to push our bass up a little bit. We're also going to push up our high end quite a decent amount as well. And to make up for the fact that we've just boosted those a bit, we're also going to back off the volume a little bit, just so that we're not pushing the sound too hard out of this particular effect. The next thing we're going to add to it is a little bit of flanger. And with this one, just going to bring our rate down a little. A little bit less depth in there. We don't want this one to be too overpowering. Bring our color up a little bit. And to add a little bit more stereo in there, we'll just bring down our rotate control a bit. And we're also just going to drop our dry and wet control a little. So we're just going to go into our master section and bring our output level up a bit. We might also add a little bit of reverb and delay to this one just to help fill it out a little bit more. So we might bring our reverb time down a little bit. We don't want it to be too overpowering. Leave our brightness control where it is. We'll add a tiny little bit more treble. And we'll just bring our dry and wet control down to about the same amount we used for the flanger. And then finally, as I said, just to top that one off, we might just throw a little bit of a chorus type effect on there as well. So we'll just bring our time down a little bit for this one. Let's bring up our low cut, help get rid of some of those lower frequencies in there. We're going to bring down our mod rate of our chorus a little bit, and we're just going to push our mod depth a little bit more. And again, we'll just make the signal a tiny bit drier, just so it's not too overpowering. So, as you can see, it started to get pretty much in the realm of where we wanted to be with our original idea for the sound. So, as I said, it gives you a little bit of a sound that can be quite expressive to play with. And by throwing in a little bit of the pitch wheel, as you heard there, can help to just add that extra little bit of character, and can also make it a little bit more fun to play the sound as well, especially if you start to pull off some little solos and stuff with this sort of tone. Especially throwing a bit of a pitch wheel in there can be quite a good thing to do. So we're going to, again, just get this set up with a fresh sound, and we're going to start on our next one and see what we can come up with that one. So now that we've had a bit of a look at how to get different tones out of FM8 and to make use of its different effects, we're going to focus more on getting movement into your sounds. Now there's a few different ways that we can do this within FM8. Firstly, we can do it via the arpeggiator. We're also going to take a look at making use of our individual envelopes for our different operators, so that we can get some nice layered sort of sounds happening in there. And finally, we're going to have a look at using our LFOs to control different parts of FM8 and get a bit more movement into the sound with those. So to start us off, we're going to get a bit of a tone happening, and once we've got that happening, we'll get stuck into the arpeggiator and see how that one works for us. So we might go for something a bit more along the lines of a square wave this time, as we've done a bit of saw wave stuff and a bit of sine wave stuff with the parabolic waveform. So what we're going to do is we're just going to turn on our A operator. We'll send that to our output and just make sure that one is on square wave. To make this sound a little bit fatter, we're also going to get another operator in there. This one we're going to put an octave higher than our previous one, as I said, just to help get something a little bit more solid happening. And we're going to go for a soft square with this one, so something a bit different than what we've used for our first one. As you can hear, starting to get something a little bit more solid in there. So we might actually make use of another operator, and we'll get that one to modulate our A and B operators a bit. Might go for something even more different with this one. We might just maybe even grab hold of one of our TX waves. We'll see what sort of stuff that one can do for us. And we're just going to route some of that into both our A and our B operators. As you can see, our harmonics display up the top updating as we move those to give us a bit of an idea of the sort of harmonics that we're getting into the sound. A little bit too strong for what we want. So what we might actually do is, instead of routing our A and B operators to the output, we might send those guys through the filter, just so that we can take off some of the high end of the sound that we've got happening. So just turning on our filter and sending that one to our output. So we're going to get our filters to work in parallel for us now. And we're going to set one up as a high pass and one up as a low pass, so you can get something a little bit interesting happening. Just bringing our resonances up for both of those. And we might also just throw a bit of movement in there using our envelope in here as well. So just something random for the moment, just to give us a little bit of something interesting to work with. Throw a couple of extra stages in there just to make it even more interesting. We'll add a little bit of our envelope amount in order to get the envelope to have an effect on the filter for us. As you can see, the multiple stages giving us a bit more of an interesting sound. So we'll just simplify that one down a little bit just to get the sound a little bit more consistent for us. So quite a nice sort of wet square wave sort of sound there. So we'll go into our arpeggiator, and firstly we'll just turn that one on. You can see as soon as we do that, that automatically starts moving along. So as we can see, we've just got that one tempo synced at the moment to our host tempo. Although you can always turn that one off as well and then use the tempo controls that are provided to be able to control that independently of the host as well. Or if you're working in standalone mode with your copy of FM8, then you can also make use of the tempo control there to be able to have a bit more control over the speed of the arpeggiator. So we've got a few different rows, as we can see, the top row representing which step we're currently on. Our next row tells us whether or not that note is going to be playing on that particular step. So for example, we could get it just to play on every second step, or add a little bit of variation in there. You can also get notes to tie on to other notes. So for example, if we tie these three together like so, as you can see there, you can also get it to add accents to various notes. And you can also adjust that one using the accent control. And as you can sort of hear happening in there, it just adds a little bit of a velocity accent to the particular notes that you place it on. Your next row allows you to adjust the order in which the notes are played, followed by our row that allows us to adjust the octave tuning, and finally a row that allows us to adjust our transpose tuning in semitones. You will find that you do also have the ability to easily reset the various different rows just by using the reset button, and you can also randomize them too, which can give you some quite interesting results. Which can be quite handy. So what we might do is we might get a little bit of an interesting sound happening and see exactly what we can do with it. So we're just going to get these last two notes to tie together. Just giving us a nice bit of a rhythmic feel. We might even see what happens if we bring a couple of these notes up an octave. Maybe even drop this one down an octave. And as I said, you can also choose to tune the notes via the transpose row as well, which can give you a little bit more fine control, which can be quite handy. So we'll just see how that one goes for us. We might just get these last few notes to lift up a little bit. And we might even drop that one there down by 3 semitones. So as you can see, quite handy for getting a little bit of a melody sort of feel in there quite easily. And you'll find that sometimes playing an arpeggiated synth sound can give you a little bit more of an expressive sort of feel. So as far as combining the rhythm and the melody of your own playing with the rhythm and the melody provided with the arpeggiated sound itself can sometimes give you really interesting and quite detailed and complex sounds. So one of the other things that you can also do with the arpeggiator is quite easily adjust how long the sequence is. So you can adjust it to pretty much arbitrary number of steps depending on how many you're after, all the way up to the full 32 steps. And as you can hear, if we just throw a bit of randomness in there, you can come up with all sorts of interesting stuff. So there's a lot to play with the FM8 arpeggiator. So it's the sort of thing I'd recommend sitting down and spending a decent bit of time with to sort of get used to all of the different features that it provides, as well as the fact that you can also do things like add shuffle and adjust the note length as well, which can also add a little bit of extra variety. So it gives you a bit of an example of the sort of sound that you'll get out of the shuffle. So it can also help to add a little bit more of an interesting feel to the sound. And as I said, you can also adjust the length of each particular note as well. So that's one where it might actually be kind of fun to chuck that one onto a MIDI controller. And get a little bit more expression happening during your playing. So that's one of the other things that I would really recommend, especially if you're used to more hardware synths where you can really get hands-on. There's nothing really stopping you from getting hands-on with FM8, as long as you spend maybe 30 or 40 seconds just sitting down and hooking up your MIDI learn to the controls that you want to be able to adjust. So now that we've had a bit of a look at the arpeggiator, we're going to move on to having a look at how to get a bit of movement happening just using our envelopes for our different operators. So as we set up earlier, we've got two main operators which are providing our sound, and those are being modulated by our C operator. So what we can do is, firstly, we're going to adjust the envelopes of our A and B operators to see exactly what sort of a sound we can get out of those guys. And then we're going to chuck a bit of an interesting envelope on our C operator as well and see exactly what sort of stuff that can do for us. So we've got our A operator selected for the moment. We might just add a tiny bit of attack to that one. We'll bring our release out a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're just going to add a few various points in there and then start to mess with these guys a little bit. So just adjust some of our curves a little. So as you can see, starting to get a little bit of movement in there. Might take a tiny bit of tweaking to sort of get where we want to be with it. And the other thing to note with these envelope views too is, much like the views in Ableton themselves, you can pan the views and zoom in and out just by clicking and dragging either left or right to pan or up and down to zoom. So it gives you quite a bit of flexibility as to how you view the waveform. Might just add a couple more little points in there. So basically what we've got happening at the moment is, while we're holding the note down, it's looping the section in between our first spike that we've got happening there and our fourth spike. So we'll just keep looping through that. And then as we release the note, you'll hear that last little spike come in, which gives us something a little bit interesting on the tail end of it there. So we might also just get something interesting happening with our B oscillator as well. We might leave the tail on this one fairly normal, just add a little bit of release to it, and we'll add a few different points in to give us something to work with. So again, we're going to go for something a little bit spiky, almost kind of along the lines of the performance LFOs in Massive, if you've used those. So we'll see how that's working for us for the moment. As you can hear with the movement from the two different oscillators coming together and starting to add quite an interesting bit of movement. We can also pan these guys a little bit. So you can get some quite interesting movement between the left and right channel of the sound as well. And when you layer up multiple different oscillators, each providing their own different envelope, or even the same envelope with a different tone, you can come up with some quite interesting stuff. So to add a last little bit of interest to this particular tone, we might just, again, add a little bit of release to our C operator. And again, we're just going to go through, right click on a few points, get a bit of detail in there to work with. And we'll get something kind of similar happening with this guy. By keeping most of our curves fairly straight will allow us to get a bit more of a solid sounding movement in there, something that's a decent bit more perceivable. You'll notice when you're using the more curvy lines that it will tend to give you a bit of a smoother flow, but sometimes that's not always what you're looking for. If you're after some quite solid movement, you might want to try and keep the curves a little bit straighter as we're doing, which will give you a little bit more of a changing sound. So if we play that one now. And we'll just bring up our modulation amount, so we get our C operator to have a bit more effect on our A and B operators. As you can hear, that also helping to add its own little bit of movement to the sound that we've got happening. So we might just get these guys about even. And we might also make use of our wave shaper as well, just to add a little bit more interest to the sound. So I'm just going to send some of our filtered sound straight into there. Or in fact, we might even send some of our sound straight from our operators themselves. As you can hear, starting to give us a bit more of a driven sort of distorted sound. And finally, just to help top that off a little bit, we're just going to make use of our LFOs. So just by going into our expert section, going in, clicking on our mod button, and takes us to our modulation section. And as we saw earlier, we've got two LFOs that we can make use of, and we can route those to any of the operators that we've got, not just our main ones, but also our wave shaper and our filter operator. So for example, we might get a synchronized triangle wave for our first LFO. We might even route that one to our filter, just to see what that can do for us. Bring the rate down a little bit. Might even send that into the negative and see what that'll do for us. And just decrease our rate a bit, just to give us a bit more of an evolving sort of sound. And we might get a synced LFO happening with our second LFO. We might go for a bit of a different waveform. Might even go for the 5th formant. As you can see, might give us something quite interesting to work with there. And again, we'll bring the rate control down a little bit for this one. And we might get that one to affect maybe our wave shaper and maybe also our C operator, which is modulating our A and B operators. We'll see what that can do for us. We might go for a bit of a simpler sort of wave so that we can hear the effect that it's having a little bit better. As you can see, giving us a little bit of a chorusy, shimmery sort of sound when we push the rate up a little bit more. So again, that might be the sort of thing you might want to hook up to a MIDI controller and give you a little bit more expressiveness. It's not the greatest tone that we've got happening, but it does give you a bit of an idea of how you can use multiple different parts of FM8 to be able to create movement within your sounds, whether you're using the arpeggiator, whether you're using various envelopes, or whether you're using the LFOs and other modulation sources. You'll find that things like your modulation wheel, aftertouch, breath control, other controllers that you've got can also be used as modulation sources just like your LFOs. So for example, if we wanted to adjust the A and B operators with our mod wheel, we could quite simply just turn those guys up there and send a bit of the mod wheel to both of those. And then when we play a note, so it's playing normal note now, push the mod wheel up. So you can hear it getting slightly detuned there. We might even hear a better sound if we send that one straight to our filter. So we'll just turn that one up to 100% and we'll just remove our first LFO from that for the moment. We might even use our first LFO to control our A and B operators instead of our mod wheel, and use the mod wheel to control the filter. So just swapping those guys around there. So as you can see, as I'm adjusting the mod wheel, you can see it moving in the display there, and you can also hear the sort of effect it's having on the sound. So if we bring that filter down a little bit further, and then try the mod wheel again. See, we're getting quite a good control over the filter there. So again, as I said, there's many different options for how you choose to set FM8 up, and there's so many features that you probably never find one particular sound that's going to make use of absolutely every last one of them. But feel free to have a play with all of the different features in FM8. Try out a lot of different routings and different feedback setups and different setups with your wave shaper and your filter operators, and you can get all sorts of amazing stuff happening. So there is one other thing that we're just going to have a quick look at just before we finish up, and that is getting audio coming into the effects version of FM8 and seeing exactly what we can do with it once we've got it in here. As you can see, it is sitting much like any other operator. So again, we can get it to modulate other operators, and we can also just send it straight to the output and just use the FM8 effects section if we like. So there's a variety of things we can do. So we'll have a look at some of that stuff in a second. So we've changed our setup just a little bit this time in order to be able to get FM8 to affect audio that's coming into it, or getting the audio coming into it to affect the sound that we're getting FM8 to make. So we've got the FM8 effects version of the VST loaded up on our audio channel as an effect. As you can see, this one's got audio in and audio out as opposed to MIDI in and audio out. And then to be able to control the synth itself with the MIDI data, we've just got a MIDI channel set up, which is having its MIDI data routed straight into the FM8 effects VST, as you can see there. So we've got a bit of a simple sound setup on our audio channel. So if we just have a listen to that one. So it's quite a bouncy sound and has an interesting tone, so it could give us something quite interesting to work with. So we'll just get FM8 fired back up. As you can see, the effect version does look very similar to the standard version of FM8. Pretty much the only difference is this guy allows you to feed audio into it. And if we go into our expert section, you'll notice if we get rid of all of our other operators, we can turn our input on, route that to our output, and then if we play that audio clip, we hear that one straight away. As I mentioned, you can also make use of the other operators. So for example, if we wanted to filter and wave shape this, we could send it into the filter, followed by the wave shaper, and then onto the output. And then if we play that one again, so as you can see, with this setup and playing, what we're now getting is we're getting our audio input going through our filter operator into our wave shaper operator. We might even just bring the level of that guy up a little. Might even push this one a little bit harder, just so that we can get a bit of a louder output happening. And then that's going on to our output. Now, if we just play the audio clip, you'll notice there's no sound coming out, simply because our filter itself is actually triggered by the notes that are incoming into the synth. So basically, if we want to get that playing and get sound coming out of it, if we just click play on that clip, and if we hold down a note, and you'll notice, depending on what note we're playing, is actually adjusting the cutoff of the filter. So again, can give you a little bit of an expressive control over audio loops, samples, things like that, just by feeding those straight into FM8. And you can also use your audio input as a modulation source for your standard operators as well. So for example, if we just get rid of our setup that we just had there, we might set up our F operator, might grab maybe a PWM ramp mod, see what sort of sound that one's got for us, and we're going to modulate that one using our input, and then we'll feed the output of our F operator to the output of the synth. So again, just get that clip playing for us, and not the best sound that we're getting so far. We'll go for a saw wave instead. Not exactly getting a great sound out of it. Let's see what happens if we just transpose this clip down an octave. So, not exactly giving us a great sound. We might go for a sine wave. We'll see what that one can do for us. So not getting a great sound out of that one with it set up that way. However, we can try going the other way as well, and we'll see what that'll do for us. So basically what we're doing is we're going to get our F operator to modulate our input. Might try a bit of a different loop and see what we can get happening with that one. Might go for a bit of a string sound and see what that can do for us. Let's get our tempo sorted out with that one. So we might also see what our sawtooth wave is going to do for us now. The sine wave was a little bit too plain when we've got it routed around this way. So the other thing you can also do, much like all of the main operators, is you can get the input to feed back on itself as well. So if we just bring that one up a little bit, and we'll get that playing. So as you can see, there's a few different ways that you can make use of the audio input in the effects version. And as I said earlier, you can also make use of all of the different effects that are available in FM8 as well and apply those to your incoming audio signal. We might try and push it more into the realm of a bit of a guitar sound, seeing it is a string sound to start off with anyway. So as you can see, like I said, all sorts of cool stuff that you can do with FM8, whether you're creating your own tones with it and playing it as a synth, whether you're feeding audio into it and using it more as a processing device. There's many, many different ways that you can get it to do an amazing amount of different stuff. So, like I said, sit down and have a good play with it, especially the FM routing section. Can take a little bit of getting used to in order to start getting the sort of tones that you want. But in this particular case, I think the practice really is worth it and does pay off. So I hope you've got some really cool stuff you can take away from the tutorial and try out in your own productions and with your own copy of FM8. And I hope to see you again in another Ben Ross's Conservatorium of Audio tutorial. Thanks for watching.